Hey everybody, welcome to the PI Playbook by Accelerator. I'm James Peltier, a partner at Dudley DeBosier. I'm filling in for my partner Chad Dudley, who usually runs the PI Playbook that we're doing today. And I'm happy. This is my first time, so forgive me if I'm not nearly as good as Chad Dudley, but I've got some great guests today that are going to make me look good. One of them is my other partner, Steve DeBosier. Steve DeBosier with the LSU shirt on. Tell everybody hello.
Hello, everybody. Stephen DeBosier, Dudley DeBosier, and the official injury lawyers of the LSU Tigers.
I will tell you that Steve is a tremendous trial lawyer at our firm. I get to work with him on cases, and I learn from him every day. And so this ought to be a place for everybody to learn. Whenever I'm listening to Steve, I learn a little bit more. Also have a very good friend of mine, also Mr. Mike Bottaro of the Bottaro Law Firm. Hello, Mike.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Mike, I know you have offices in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. Tell me a little bit about your law firm.
Yeah, for sure. Well, today we are celebrating the Boston Celtics beat in the finals. I've got my mug here. So that's a nice way to start. But yeah, we represent plaintiff personal injury victims throughout Rhode Island and southeastern Massachusetts primarily. General personal injury practice. It includes nursing home abuse, falls, dog bites, car accidents, of course. And we've grown the firm with a lot of your help.
Well, that's great. And look, I knew you before you ever started working with Accelerator, and you had a fantastic law firm that's very well run, but you still went to Accelerator to get some help. Tell me a little bit about why.
Well, the why is we want to do what's best for the people in our community. We've been very blessed to have this platform where each year we're able to help more people in our communities. And it gets to a point where, my background is not in operations. I don't have a business degree. I got into this because I wanted to help people and I wanted to be a better lawyer. And you guys, the folks at Accelerator, know about that. I think we share a lot of similar core values, and coming at it from that perspective of wanting to do the right thing for the people in our communities. And then with that kind of perspective and those core values, learning how to do that in a sustainable way that is smart for the people in our firm, the people in our community as well.
Yeah, I know Chad and Steve and I are trial lawyers and we try cases, but we're blessed to work with Chad Dudley and Mickey Love that kind of run Accelerator. And I know both those guys have been into hundreds and hundreds of law firms to break them down, to help them, to help them in a lot of ways, and have learned so much in every law firm they go to. I know that when they went to your law firm, they came back and told me some great stuff they learned also. But they're able to bring that conversation, that wealth of knowledge to other law firms. What are some of the things they brought to you, by the way, to you and your law firm that you feel like have helped the most?
So, Accelerator, Mickey Love and Chad Dudley in particular, I'll start with Mickey. Her philosophy, as I mentioned, the core values are right there. And I think one thing that she's helped with is, number one, seeking first to understand is one of her favorite sayings. And I love that saying because here on the East Coast, man, I'm Italian. I tend to talk a lot. I tend to use my hands when I'm talking a lot, and that's not always good because sometimes I'm starting to talk before somebody smart like Steve is explaining things to me. And so, there's some basic communication skills to start with before we even get into all the complexities of running a law practice that I think are worthwhile to point out that Mickey and Chad and all the folks at Accelerate. We work with Peter Ellis, for example, Kathy. There's so many talented people at your organization, James, that have been in the trenches before. It's not their first rodeo, so to speak, and they can bring that wealth of knowledge and wisdom just to get us oriented. So, that's a starting point, right? It's just listening to your people, listening to smart people like Steve, and then from there, if you got your two ears, you can start to take some stuff in along with the hard work that goes with it.
Yeah. And look, in this podcast today, I think is a little bit about that, but also maybe a little bit about one of the cases that we end up cooperating on. And in that sense, how did y'all determine not only to work on the operation side, but also to bring a case or two or several cases into the juncture together to figure out which ones to work on together?
That's a great question. I think first of all is coming out of the pandemic at our law firm, we have more cases than most firms in our jurisdiction that are in the court system. In contrast, there is very few cases that have been tried to a jury verdict in our jurisdiction, really going back 10 years, even before the pandemic, but certainly since the pandemic. And so the folks at our firm, myself included, are and were very rusty with our basic trial skills coming out of the pandemic. We've had some binding arbitrations. We've done some different things, obviously, but we understood that to run a successful law firm means that we have got to have good people that have the experience to try cases, and we got to be pushing for that. You know, if one of our core values is fight for what's right, standing up to these bullies, these greedy insurance companies, we got to be prepared, man. You got to enter that arena with your battle axe sharpened.
Yeah, I agree. And Steve, I'll ask you that because I know our law firm in particular, as many cases as you've tried and places you go speak, you've brought in people before to try a case with, like Papa Don, that you did it basically to go learn, to go, look, no matter how good I think I am, I can be better. Tell us a little bit about that, Steve.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Don Keenan is my mentor. I spent a lot of time with him. And the reason was because, it's the practice of law. You're always learning, you're always learning, you're always learning. And I thought I knew everything I needed to know when I was younger and arrogant. Now I'm just older and arrogant. But, all joking aside, I have learned so much from people like Papa Don. And there's a whole lot of other people down the list. I'm going to see Keith Mitnick today. And just some really, really great lawyers that have taken the time to help me with my progression. And it's part of giving back to the community and giving back to the community of personal injury lawyers to say, let's go figure out how to do this best for the clients that we're lucky enough to represent. Because you got to know, I mean, you guys know this more than most, but there's only this many people that get in a wreck and this many people that get hurt, and then only about this many that hire either Dudley DeBosier or Mike Bottaro or anybody else that's listening. So we got to do our best job for those people we're lucky enough to represent. So how do we do that? Well, sometimes it's telling insurance companies, no, we're not going to do what you want us to do. We have a good case. We have a case that's worth a jury's review of this case to make the decision what's fair, not what some asshole in New York decides is fair or not. No offense to people in New York, but that's what happened in this latest case. And the guy from New York is screaming at us that we're unreasonable. What he meant by unreasonable is we didn't want to do what they wanted us to do. And Mike and the client and their team said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to go try this case and go figure out what's fair.
In this case, I'll get in a little bit, but I kind of think I know the answer to this. But every case that's worth some money isn't necessarily one that is a great case to try. Steve, tell us a little bit about case selection. When you're picking in the best cases to try, what are you looking for in a case? And I know you and Mike came up with this together and found a couple cases, this one in particular, but what is your guideline of what you're looking for when you try to decide what cases you want to try?
That's a great question, James. October 2013 is the month and the year of which I decided I wasn't going to try the cases that the insurance company wanted me to try. I wanted to try the cases I wanted to try, which is simply this. I'm a math guy, and so the formula is this. You got to have a bad defendant that did bad, nasty things, and you got to have a worthy plaintiff. And you add those two together, you have a just verdict where you get full justice for your client. So when I'm looking for cases, most people that come to me and say, let me tell you how hurt my client is. That's part of the equation. But every time somebody tells me that, my question is, what and how and why did they get hurt? What did the defendant do that the jury might care about? That's when I look at it and say, okay, clearly you have a worthy plaintiff here that's been hurt and had these problems. But now I know that the jury's going to look at that defendant and go, no, sir, you shouldn't act that way, not in our community. So that's the way we look at it. That's every case is looked at through that lens.
Yeah, I know you got jurors and they care about a plaintiff some, but they care about themselves and their community more. And I kind of feel like you pick the cases that you think the community will care about most, that they believe that their verdict can make a difference. And that's not usually in something that's just a one-off. It's how can you spread that out to as many people as you can? How do you do that, Steve?
Well, it's a concept of, Rodney Jew. If you ever heard Rodney Jew, he says, here comes everybody. Don Keenan says random victims. And it is, I mean, is what this defendant's doing, does it put everybody at risk or a large percentage of the people at risk? Or is it just, one individual doing something bad? But when they can look at this and say, man, we, as a juror, we need to take action, because if we don't take action, this guy's going to do it again. And so to find those cases where you can look at it and say, is this somebody that has one tenant, or is this somebody that has 1,000 tenants? Because if they're treating one tenant wrong of 1,000, there's a good chance the rest of them are being treated the same way. Is it a trucking company? Do they have one driver, or do they have 500 drivers? Those are the things that we're looking for, is how do we identify those problems in any of the cases?
Yeah, and I know in discovery you get into that a whole lot. I know, like with Rodney Jr., you got the purple box, which is when the incident occurred. And not only are you looking for how many victims that are out there, but how many decisions were made along the way that could have prevented this incident from occurring and people being hurt. And those are all things I believe juries look at, is how many people affected and how many decisions were made along the way that could have stopped this from occurring.
By the way, James, the defense lawyer's tactic for that is, this was just one unfortunate accident, right? Which is nothing to see here. Jury, move on. This is just one isolated event. But we also not only look at the number of random victims, but we also go back and as far back in time as possible to figure out what decision was made that could have changed the life of this plaintiff. Right. And we found that in Mike's case, and it was fantastic, and it worked.
Mike, tell me a little about the case. I know you don't want to say the name. The case is still ongoing, so we're not going to say the name of the case, but my understanding is it was a stairwell case. Can you tell me a little bit about the case and then why you might have chose to get Steve's input on this one to get his assistance?
Yeah, so first of all, we had just an ideal woman that I think if she was right before us, James, you would love her. You would put your arms around her. She reminded me of my Italian Nana, who was about 4 foot nothing. And I'd go over there on Sundays and you would smell the marinara sauce, and it was just a warm feeling. And that's what our client evoked. She was in her 70s, and she cared greatly about her family, in particular her daughter, who was going through some hard times. And she was over at, frankly, a slumlord type of a tenement house in an urban area. And she was there to help her daughter. Her daughter had been through some rough times. And in doing that, she was down in this basement, which Steve likes to call a horror show, which, as we got into the case, we found out there was all kinds of awful violations. It was a very unsafe area. And as she was going up the stairs, she had this collapsed railing. She put her little hand up, all 4 foot nothing of her, and she fell back multiple stairs and crashed down onto the concrete with multiple fractures and an extended inpatient hospital stay. And after that, there was some other really touching, tragic things that happened to her. Namely her daughter passing away, along with her, our client getting a bad infection, prolonged recovery, and to talk to her and to meet her, we felt was, this is a worthy plaintiff. This is somebody who was actually trying to help her family, and this never should have happened to her. So that part of the equation. When Steve got involved and looked at it, he really helped teach me and teach our team about that part of the equation. The second part of the equation, we had a lawyer, Greg, in the office that did a lot of the discovery on the case, and he was able in depositions to figure out that the slumlord landlords, I have to use that term because I think it fits here. Frankly, there's a lot of great landlords out there, but in this particular case, he found a lot of evidence from this their own testimony that really made them appear to be unlikable and have done some really lousy things. That this was a real preventable tragedy from happening. And I know Steve has some of the stuff he pulled out in opening statement and that they went through in the testimony, but you put those two things together, and I learned so much from Steve and your trial team folks at Accelerator that helped us identify this case, and it was verified by Steve and Adam and the folks at Accelerator.
Steve, that's a good point for me to ask you. I know you get involved sometimes from the very beginning, and sometimes you get asked the week of trial to come in and help try the case. Where was the life of this case when you were brought into it?
Oh, this about 30 days before trial, which I don't mind doing. I prefer to have a little more time, but I give Greg at Mike's office a lot of credit. He did some great depositions. He went to the scene. They had some video of the handrail that popped up and let this lady go falling down the stairs. They did a lot of great research that helped me get me and Adam Savoy to go try the case. And Greg was there with us, kicking butt the whole time. So it was a great experience. But like I said, it's always better if we can get these cases earlier so we can kind of control the narrative. But luckily, in the short order we had to work on this case, we had some great information that helped us get where we needed to be.
Now, Steve, I know you've read a lot of books and you're big on trial story, as you should be. All great trial attorneys are. What was the trial story that you developed in this case?
So, Mike touched on it a little bit. We had a very worthy plaintiff. So we had that part covered, right? The other part is there a bad defendant, right? And the defendants were trying to paint these people as, poor, trying to make a living, immigrants that were doing the best thing. But what we found out was a couple of things that just shocked the conscience of the jury, which was simply, first, 20 years before this lady fell, they were supposed to get a permit to build these stairs. They ripped out the old stairs and put in new stairs. And they chose not to get a permit. And what happens when you don't get a permit, they knew this, was that the house isn't inspected. And so they never had anybody from the city even know that they built these stairs that were, as Mike pointed out, I called it straight from a nightmare on Elm Street. When you looked at these stairs, it was pretty terrible. Freddy Krueger's coming down these stairs. And so we looked at that and said, this guy made the decision to violate all these safety codes, either intentionally or unintentionally, by hiding it from the city. And then it got worse. This guy, believe it or not, had the washing machine and the dryer for 6 units at the basement. And the machines were coin operated. And that doesn't seem like much of a thing until you start thinking about all these things this guy did to avoid responsibility and avoid building something safe. So this is what he did. He put in there by himself 6 light switches that controlled 6 light bulbs above the washer and dryer. And the reason why I did that is if you're in unit 1, you had to turn on light switch 1, or you could turn on any one you wanted, but you were billed for that, and he wasn't billed. And when the jury heard that, they all just stared him down like, you got to be kidding me. You want me to pay for the lighting? And so in addition to that, there were 6 lights in a row above the washer and dryer in this basement, and that was it. And 2 of them were missing from number 2 and number 4. So if you were in apartment number 2, you had to use somebody else's electricity, but it wasn't to be his. And so it was like that for years. And these tenants just put up with this shit. It was unbelievable to me. But when the jury found out this guy set it up this way for years back, remember we talked about going way back? 20 years it's been set up like this. And then this guy, slumlord is what Mike's calling him, and I don't disagree, set this lady up for a trap and then left it like this for years. Even at the time of trial, it was still like this. It's unbelievable. He was basically saying, I don't give a shit what this jury does.
Steve, when you say like this, describe the stairs and the railing that led to this problem or this injury.
Probably should, if I had some more time, and add some pictures to it, but it was phenomenal. I mean, this rickety set of stairs had a handrail attached to 2 points, which is a violation because once one side breaks, there's nothing else to hold it up, which is exactly what happened here. The stairs were all uneven, different sizes. The door at the top, when you walked up with your clothes from the washing machine, the door opened into the stairs. So if you can imagine walking up a set of stairs, grabbing the door and pulling it to you, you have to back up and you got to grab the rail, which doesn't work. And so I kept thinking, what's worse, having no handrail at all or having a handrail that fails when you grab it? Well, I think the jury knew. They were like, holy crap. When you have a handrail that doesn't work because it fails, that's the worst possible scenario. So this whole set of stairs, there was probably 7 or 8 code violations. And he had the wires from those magical light switches running on the outside of the wall behind the handrail. So you had to reach around this small handrail where your fingers were entwined in the power lines to the electricity for the lights. And when the jury saw that, and we had the expert stand in front of the jury and explaining it, just to watch them one by one stare at this defendant, and I mean, eyeball him. It was interesting to watch for sure.
I just listened to you right now. I can think of 5 or 6 different things he could have done differently over time off the top of my head that would have prevented this. And had he put forth near the effort and safety as he did to save a few pennies, we would not have had a case at all, and our sweet lady would still have the full life that she had before. Steve, I know you're big on rules, and I know there's a lot of rules in a case, but you try to narrow them down, and I don't know what you did in this case, but usually there are 2 or 3 rules that you present to the jury that are typically simple safety rules that makes it hard for people to disagree with them. I don't know if you remember them off the top of your head or if you did them in this case, but tell me about it.
Well, the safety rules all started back 20 years before, which was if you're going to build a set of stairs that you're going to collect rent from people, then you have to get it inspected by the city to know if you have any violations before you start collecting rent. He did not do that. And then there's online, it was astonishing to me online how you can get any information you needed to build a set of stairs. He didn't do that either. And the other thing is he has this really shitty apartment building right next to his beautiful house. So he would walk. And he said, well, I didn't know anything about it, but he would walk to go collect his coins every week, and he'd go down these same set of stairs to collect his coins and leave. So he knew everything about this. So he violated the codes. He violated just the safety rule about having it inspected. And then he violated the last thing, which is he had a broken handrail. I don't know what could be worse, but the broken handrail all stems from the fact that he never had it inspected in the first place. They never would have passed code had he actually talked to the city and said, hey, I'm about to start collecting rent. And then this gem of a fellow, as soon as I won't tell you her name, but as soon as she filed the lawsuit, they raised her rent for her daughter $100 every month for 6 months with the intent of, if you don't stop this lawsuit, we're going to keep raising the rent. And while she was in the hospital, tending to her needs that they caused for her, they scared the daughter so much. She was already having an alcohol problem. She drank herself to death while her mother was in the hospital. And when we started talking about that, the look on the jury's faces were like, you bastard. And he was. And hopefully he'll see this, and hopefully he'll fix the goddamn stairs.
You know, it's so sad when somebody dies, because I know when you try a case, you really get into who the plaintiff is, what they had before, what was taken away from them, and then you empower the jury to do whatever they can to give them hope, to get back to as close as they could have been before. But when you take away somebody's life, there is no coming back from that.
That's right. That's right. And you know, the defense desperately wanted to keep those facts away from the jury. But as we explained to the judge, she had shattered legs from this fall, shattered for a 78-year-old lady. But her biggest injury was not the orthopedic shattered legs. It was the fact that she was sitting in a hospital bed, knowing that she had been with her daughter to keep her from drinking again. That's exactly why she was living with her daughter. And she knows while she's sitting in that hospital bed for almost 90 days, she knows what her daughter's doing and that she has no control over it because she's not there. And so the judge said, that's an element of the emotional damages you caused, and we're going to let them talk about it. And it scared the shit out of them, and it should have, because it was horrendous what they did to her.
Yeah, Steve, I know you went up to Massachusetts for this case, and I know the team you have put together, both of Dudley DeBosier people and Accelerated people, that depending on where the case is, what people work on the case, and you have a whole team who handle it. In this case, what team did you bring to you or for you to get up to speed and ready to go and to try the case?
Well, I had Adam Savoy and Nikki, his assistant, who came up there with us as well. But also don't forget, we utilized some great talented people from Mike's office too. And so we had, Greg up there helping us, and Megan from his office up there helping us. So we had a lot of people, and I gave them specific instructions. What I need from you is to watch the jury and see what they react to, so that I know in closing what is it that we need to really hammer home. And they helped me out tremendously. They like this, they didn't like this. Unfortunately, those of us that are on TV, Mike couldn't be there because we didn't want the jury to say, "Oh, it's another TV lawyer," which they sometimes do, sometimes they don't. You never know. But Mike couldn't be there, but he had great people that were there helping us from beginning to end. It was awesome.
Mike, that's a true testament, because I can tell you that's not the case everywhere we go. There's different level of teams, and Steve did come back and tell me how easy it was to work with your team, and what a professional, great job they did. So a true testament to you, your office, and everybody there, because although we try to help everybody, there's different levels of help people need, and in all fairness, really, really fantastic job by your office. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Steve, in each of these cases, and we could probably talk about this case for hours, and it's kind of short here, but I want to touch on a couple things. Pretrial motions, were you involved in that, and any key ones there?
There was, a bunch of pretrial motions that we were able to argue. Luckily, the judge allowed me to do it by Zoom, but they argued remedial measures, which cracked me up because there was no subsequent or remedial measures, which I thought was just entertaining that he even said that. They had a lot of things, as I told you earlier, they were trying to keep out the fact that they raised the rent and they threatened her. They were trying to keep out, they filed a bunch of motions saying that, you're not supposed to listen to a Louisiana lawyer about what a case is worth, which I thought was bizarre. And the judge shut them down, and I let them. I'll tell you what I found interesting. I don't know if I even told you this, James, but the defense lawyer, when we started the trial, didn't have his TV. And we had brought in from Mike's office, a big TV to show the jury, exhibits. And in front of the clerk, the defense lawyer said, "Man, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't have a TV to present my evidence." And I said, "You're welcome to use ours." And the clerk looked at me and she said, "You must not be from around here." I said, "Well, it doesn't matter. They don't have any evidence that I'm scared of. We're going to kick their ass no matter what. So feel free." And he couldn't believe it. He was like, "I don't understand how y'all act that way." I said, "What are you scared of? We're just here to give the jury the truth." And every time I told him that made him incredibly nervous. Every time he'd complain about something, or the judge, I said, "Judge, we just want to give him the truth. That's it."
And Steve, I can't agree with that more. Everybody's like, "We've got to tell our story." Well, there's no our story here. Their story. There's one story, and right. we've got to tell it the way it is, because hopefully we're on the side of right each and every time. And the simpler we can make it to break it down each time of what the true story is, the better off we are for a jury. Yeah.
I'd like to say, James, that's one thing that was really reinforced by your team, Steve's team, is finding the simplicity. A lot of times the insurance companies and their lawyers are trying to muddy the waters. And, for our younger lawyers and our team here to have that confidence to really come in and just, tell it straight, because there's the truth. There is such a thing as the truth. It's a noble profession. It really is. And not to get bogged down in this muddying of the water and take the eyes off the ball, so to speak. It was a tremendous learning lesson that was reinforced by all your folks. It was really appreciated.
I know we do an exercise where we put all the good facts on one side, and then the facts we may not think are so good on the other side. But each one of those, you have to try to find a way to turn it in to either neutralize it or make it a fact for you, right? Because they're facts of the case one way or the other. And I know Steve, as well as anybody, has a way of looking at things in a way of, all right, how do we neutralize them or show it in a way that's good for us and make sure we get it out first, where it's ours and not theirs to present. Steve, did you have any of those in this case?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'll tell the story on myself and a friend of mine, who I won't tell you who it is, but we were having in a conference speaking to a couple hundred people, and somebody said, "Well, how do you make things simple?" And she said, "Well, ask Mr. DeBosier over here. He's not smart enough to make it complicated." So I said, well, that must be a compliment in there somewhere. But it's really true. As lawyers, and this is straight from Rodney Jew and Amy Hall that works underneath them. We have the horrible part of knowing too many facts. With the knowledge we have of every case, and to be able to whittle it down. Mark Twain is what the term I use. Is to whittle it down to figure out what's really important. And then what we do is we take, let's say, 5 to 10 facts, and then go to a focus group and say, what is important? What is it that your hair's on fire because this person did it? And for the focus group, they were furious that this guy built these stairs without getting a permit and getting it inspected. Everything else flowed from that. And once we got there, we knew, holy goodness, this is what this case is about. It's not any more complicated than that. And they argued about codes and what number and Massachusetts state code, AST. Jury didn't give a shit about that. It was simply, was it supposed to be this way? No. If you'd have told them about it, would it be this way? No. That was it.
Now, Steve, I'll try to do this in kind of the order, but or Mike, you may be able to tell me, I don't know, what was the offer before we got involved in the case? Do you know?
$60,000.
All right. And then can somebody tell me, was there any progression of offers along the way up until trial?
Oh, yeah. When the good folks got involved, Steve and Adam, etc., all of a sudden we're maybe a week or so out from trial, and we're getting a high 6-figure offer on the case, and I'm like, wow, our case got a lot better in the last 30 days. I wonder what just happened here. And then from there was a lot of hilarity and frustration. Very interesting. It was a real, for me, look inside of how I'll use the word evil insurance companies can be, because they should have known. We sure as heck wrote them enough letters in the 2.5 years or so. And we're going to find out that they actually did know, because they got our letters and they read the deposition transcripts just like us. I mean, so they knew this case. They knew what they put this poor woman through, and yet they sat on it. They played games with us all the way right up through one of the final pretrial hearings, and even over the weekend into the trial. I mean, Steve has a lot of, I don't know how much you want to get into the weeds here, but we're really excited for where we're headed on this case, for sure.
Oh yeah, they the Friday before we're supposed to pick the jury on Monday, they offered their $1 million policy, and I told them no, which they were shocked. They were like, no one turns down $1 million. I'm like, well, that's not true. We just did. And my client has faith in us and faith in herself and faith in her case to go proceed to trial. And they sent an email from the vice president of this big company. It's a big company. It's scathing, just calling us every name in the book, and that I'm bringing Louisiana politics to Massachusetts, all kind of shit. I'm like, whatever, dude. This is going to be... Adam and I joke, we're like, this is a great letter to put exhibit number 1 on the bad faith case on the back end of this thing, of this nasty letter from this guy.
Now,
sure
Mike, tell me if I'm wrong. The $60,000 offer, there was no new discovery, no new facts in the case. You just called their bluff and said, step up to the plate, big boys, let's try the case. And that offer went from $60,000 to high 6 figures with no new evidence whatsoever.
Well, yeah, first of all, not only that is true, but each way in the progression of discovery throughout this case, we believed in this case from the beginning. And we had marked this case down, put an asterisk around it, circle it with a red marker. And throughout the case, under Massachusetts law, we were sending them directly to the insurance company and the defense lawyer. We were sending them letters saying, hey, what are you guys doing? We had no money on the table. They refused to negotiate. They refused to talk settlement. They didn't offer us one red penny for about, I don't know, 2.5 years. And you're 100% right, James. Somewhere towards the end of discovery, they made a nuisance value settlement offer of $60,000, like as if we were bothering them in some way, and discovery was closed. They had our building inspector expert report that listed a whole bunch of building inspection violations. They had our medical expert reports. They had their own client's deposition testimony. They had our wonderful client's deposition testimony. They knew the whole enchilada, okay? And they sat on it, and I was like, oh, wow, this is unusual, I would say. But maybe not for some of these insurance companies, because they don't think anyone's going to stand up to them. And I'm just so pleased that we had your help to be able to do that.
Now, Mike, Steve told me y'all did a great job of lawyering and papering up the file and laying out the offers and the fact that they didn't respond properly. And because of that, I think you're going to potentially on the back end be able to collect a good bit more money. I know they got some rules that we don't have in Louisiana that I love in Massachusetts, but by them not doing the proper thing, what are the damages that you may be able to collect on because of that?
So we're in Massachusetts, so we have bad faith codified by statute, and those laws allow us to get a multiple of the judgment that's been entered, that's public record, that Steve and Adam are gonna work on as we move forward on this thing, to send a message to this insurance company that you can't do business this way in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Steve, where did y'all get in the trial? How far along? And then tell me the outcome.
So we made an offer to get the insured off the hook. They've got some of the best bad faith laws I've ever seen in Massachusetts, not just for the insured, but for a third party like our client. They have to treat them right as well. So we made an offer to them that they would pay their policy limits plus judicial interest of $250,000. They said, no, we're not going to do that. And then when we put on the expert and I stood next to the insured slumlord and walked through what this guy had done, all these defendants wanted to do was get this case done before their insured had to take the stand. He did not want to be anywhere near that witness stand after this jury was glaring him down. And so ultimately what they agreed to do was reach a stipulated judgment of $2.25 million, so he didn't have to take the stand. So we agreed to a stipulated judgment. The judgment was very important to us because the judgment is what they use in Massachusetts for the damages for the bad faith action, which we believe is a very clear bad faith in the fact that they offered $60,000 and then agreed to a stipulated judgment of $2.25 million 30 days later. And so the damages are double the judgment, which is $4.5 million, up to 3 times the judgment, which was $6.75 million. So when they're done, there's a very good chance that this insurance company, if things go the way we're hoping, based on their actions, that they're going to pay Miss Vicky, don't want to say her name, about $10 million. And that's a big deal from $60,000.
That is a big deal. Now let me get this straight. You came in, y'all did voir dire. Y'all had to pick the jury panel. How long did that take?
Well, Massachusetts just got jury assisted jury selection. I mean, attorney assistant jury selection. And so for 6 hours, I met all 62 of our potential jurors.
One at a time?
One at a time. And it was one of the oddest things because you're up at the bench and I'm talking to them and I'm asking, how they're doing. How's the mom and them? I want to know what this person's like. And the defense lawyer asked the same question of each person. Are you going to use your common sense or are you going to let this evil guy from Louisiana tell you what to award in this case? And the judge tried to stop him. I said, no, let him go. They hate him. And they did. But it was like, why does it matter where he's from? But he thought that he was onto something and the jurors did not. And by the way, if I could try any case in the 50 states, it would be in Massachusetts because of their bad faith rules and holy goodness, they're just good people. James, we went out for a state that's mostly red and is pissed off at any personal injury lawyer. That was not when I got there. I also had had dinner with Mike the night before on Saturday and was astonished that everybody in Rhode Island knew who he was and liked him, which is really cool. I mean, that was a really cool experience.
Thank you for that. I want to come back to something we said earlier, James, about what Steve just said about the good people on the jury. One of the frustrations post-pandemic in our jurisdiction is the lack of jury trials. And so if I could encourage any of the lawyers listening to this, in the sense that when we are forced into arbitration, and hopefully we try not to do this, to go to mediation, running of the bulls, for example, but how many times do we get beat down by so-called mediators or so-called arbitrators who say to us, well, jurors are unfriendly in this jurisdiction. Even Steve heard that in Massachusetts. Well, we're conservative here and all this. We hear that all the time. But, I just praise God for the faith that we had in this case, because that's not true. We do have good people in our communities when you have a worthy plaintiff and a bad acting defendant, as Steve pointed out at the beginning of the show.
Look, I know Steve and I, and we've got cases in Georgia and Wisconsin and Texas and Utah and Mississippi. And I do hear the difference in the juries. And most of the time you hear why your jury is more conservative than the other wherever you are, or the rules aren't there. But one thing that I think Steve will back me up when we find is if you have a defendant that has done something wrong, that has harmed the community, even the most conservative people, or maybe even more, the more conservative people are more likely to punish a bad actor. They may not give a lot of money just to a plaintiff, but the conservative people that care, man, they care about doing the right thing and enforcing doing the right thing. So sometimes your most conservative venues can turn out to be your best ones if you do a great job on case selection.
Oh yeah, when I hear those terms, James, you and I hear it all the time, right? We go to a try case and they say, "Oh, I got to tell you, this is the most conservative jury in the country." And my answer to them is, "Good. I'm happy they're conservative, because conservative people are rule followers and they don't like people that break the rules and hurt other people. That's what I'm looking for. We want somebody conservative." Now, let me tell you this. If you just look at the presidential election and look where Massachusetts is, it's not nearly as red as Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama. We're like 75% red state. And so to tell me that's more conservative probably isn't true either. But good people. I mean, I talked to 62 people over 6 hours. Good-hearted, hardworking, give a shit people. And I'll take those people all day long.
Well, we've kind of running a little short on time now. Steve, is there anything that in particular jumped out at you about the case, or have we covered it, or anything you want to tell our audience?
I was very honored by Mike and his team to get Adam and I involved. I really appreciate it. It was a great opportunity. It was a great honor, and they did great work. And so they made my life very easy. So thank you again, Mike.
Mike, everything I know about you and your organization, I wasn't surprised to hear anything. Steve came back and told me how fantastic y'all were. So I'll say from all of us, thank you for getting us involved, and we would love to team up with your team anytime. And so we really do appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, well, go ahead, Mike. You can have the last word.
I was just going to say, for anyone listening, reach out to learn. It's a lifelong learning process, and I'm so grateful for your organization that it exists. And I can't thank Steve and Adam and the team enough. Thanks for having me today.
All right. Well, that's a PI Playbook, and that's going to be a wrap on this particular case. If you have any questions, I know that Mike and Steve are always happy to answer questions about the case, or if you want any hints on future cases that are similar in any way. All we ever do believe in is sharing with each other and learning and getting better. So thank you for tuning in today, and we look forward to seeing you on the next podcast of PI Playbook by Accelerator. Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.